Mother's Cookies began in 1914 with a man named Noah Meek Wheatley. He worked hard as a newspaper vendor on the corner of Market and Kearny Streets in San Francisco, and every day an elderly couple would walk past his cart with a basket of vanilla cookies, which they sold door to door. He finally stopped the couple, tried one, and decided to buy the rights to the recipe right then and there. With San Francisco still struggling to recover from the destruction left by the 1906 earthquake, Meek came across the bay to Oakland and began producing 2,000 vanilla cookies a night from a 3-square-foot oven in a small bakery on 12th Street. The Wheatleys continued to work hard, churning out their boxes of vanilla cookies at $1 a box. By 1922, the bakery outgrew its small storefront. In 1949, Meek bought a larger bakery on 18th Street in Oakland, which would become its home for the next 6 decades. Mother's Cookies would go on to sell millions of cookies, most notably the pink and white sprinkle-coated circus animal cookies. They would also be known for their taffy cookies as well. Although they sold millions of cookies, they were still considered small in comparison to their national rivals. As part of their advertising campaign, the company introduced their own version of baseball cards in 1952 and 1953, with 2 sets released featuring players in the Pacific Coast League. It would be another 30 years before the company would introduce baseball cards again. In 1982, Wayne Bebb moved from Southern California to the Bay Area to start his new role as Director of Advertising and Sales Promotions with Oakland-based Mother's Cookies. His job was simple. He needed to get grocers excited about their cookies. The stretch goal was to get permission from a store to plonk down a display at the end of the aisle, which would allow his salespeople to collect commissions. Although the company had been around for almost 70 years, it was considered small and regional compared to other companies like Nabisco, Keebler, and Pepperidge Farms. The company needed a viral marketing campaign, but this was before social media existed. They needed a campaign that was regionally based, but nationally recognized. Baseball cards were the way to do it. One of the secrets to the success of Mother's Cookies promotion was that the baseball card industry was just starting to take off again after several decades of consumer disinterest. The industry wasn't fully formed in 1983. There weren't conventions in every county, and there weren't many dedicated baseball card shops at all. Baseball cards were about to become a thing. It was getting easier to find boxes at Price Club. Drugstores suddenly carried displays of cellophane tri-packs. Collectors began to speculate, and if a company could get their name associated with the hobby, it would allow them to punch above their weight class. At the beginning of this boom in 1983, the Giants handed a full box of cards to the first 25,000 people who walked into Candlestick Park. The paid attendance for the first promotion was 21,599, so it's likely there were several thousand boxes left over. Bebb wasn't as excited about the inaugural 1983 set of the San Francisco Giants team set of cards. He wanted something more. Bebb looked to Barry Cola for help. He wanted Mother's Cookie cards to be seen as art by comparison, and the artistry had everything to do with the photographer and set producer Barry Cola, who was relatively new to the industry. They drew inspiration from the original Mother's Cookie cards from the 1950s, which had rounded corners. They decided the new Mother's Cookie cards needed that same distinct look. It wasn't going to be easy. The cards required a totally different production process, which required them to die cut instead of simply split. But this was part of the strategy. Bebb and Cola wanted the cards to look like portraits instead of action shots. To do that, they couldn't just slap a picture on dinky slats of cardboard. In the early years, the cards were printed on what was called chrome coat paper, Cola said. It was really glossy on one side, real quality paper, and the baseball cards were printed at one of the major postcard companies at the time. They had to put a high gloss on them afterwards, which gave them more of a quality look to it. Consider what baseball cards were like in the early 1980s. The cardboard was matte and dull, but the pictures were often afterthoughts at best. The cards were quite nice. A nice glossy full-bleed photograph, sometimes action, but most of the time a classic baseball pose showing off the stadium in the background. Crisp white cardstock with rounded corners, probably the most distinct design element. Just the player's name and the team in small Helvetica, bold text. The early cards often used the same logo type, a real nice design touch. Starting in 1987, the design was unchanged for a complete decade, and for good reason. It was pretty much perfect. But in the early 1980s, Mother's cookie sets were handed out to the first 25,000 fans, and 30,000 sets were produced. They were limited runs, handed out for free at a specific location. Weekend games at Candlestick in the summer were day games. The fans flocked to the stadium. There were always a lot of Dodger games scheduled for the weekend, and those could draw 50,000 fans. So there were seasons when Mother's Cookies Days wasn't the #1 hottest ticket of the summer. But it always was one of the hottest tickets of the summer, especially during the baseball card boom, when they were giving away the free baseball cards in June. The Giants drew about 1,500 more fans on average than a typical weekend in July or August. The crowds were already bigger on Sundays, and Mother's Cookies made them bigger, especially after baseball cards became a full-blown fad. All those extra people got the name Mother's Cookies burned into their brains. My first time at Candlestick coincided with the 1987 Mother's Cookies cards promotions between the Astros and the Giants. My uncle, who was an avid baseball card collector, purposely chose that day to get a free set of cards and to get Chris Spire, who was autographing his cards that day. Not a bad deal if you ask me. Barry Cola was producing all of the Mother's Cookie sets. Several years later, he had the coveted license from Major League Baseball, which allowed him to produce his own sets and postcards. His Don Mattingly sets still draw a lot of collectors' attention, as do his Will Clark and Nolan Ryan sets. The players started to notice the quality of the cards. They would look forward to the shoots, even which resulted in unique cards that were hard to duplicate. When it came to getting players' cooperation, though, it didn't hurt to have a secret weapon. It used to really frustrate all of the other baseball card photographers that I could run up to the clubhouse and get 3 or 4 players to put on their dress whites and come down with gloves to pose for their pictures, Bebb said. These other photographers would say to Barry, "What has he got on them? Why do they come down for him?" The Friday before every promotion, every player got a box. Inside were 10 boxes of cookies, 2 full sets of cards, 250 of the player's individual card to hand out to family, friends, or fans, and an uncut sheet of cards in a custom lucite wraparound wall frame. The promotion expanded to several teams west of the Mississippi, with the Astros, the A's, the Mariners, Dodgers, Padres, Rangers, and Angels, eventually getting their own sets. Additional superstars such as Nolan Ryan, Will Clark, Matt Williams, Jose Canseco, Mark McGwire, and King Griffey Jr. were also given their own individual sets. And no, I didn't forget about Tim Salmon and Mike Piazza too. As the promotion and hobby got more popular though, collectors and dealers around the country wanted a piece. Some would show up with 500 tickets. Upper deck tickets at Candlestick could be as low as $5, and the general admission tickets were even cheaper. And send an army of children through the turnstiles, back it out to drop off the cards, and they would take a new ticket and repeat the process over and over at different gates. In response, Mother's Cookies played around with the format. Instead of giving away a full set, many of the giveaways in the 80s had fans redeem a voucher for the missing cards. 2 of the cards were only available through this process, usually some coaches or trainers in a checklist. 8 cards which you cross your fingers and hope for the correct ones to come back. Thankfully, the stars were guaranteed in the 20 you got at the park. This wouldn't eliminate the speculation entirely, but it would throttle the collectors enough for them to consider whether it was worth the effort. In the realm of baseball cards, Mother's Cookies is best known for their team sets, which were inserted into products in the markets of certain major league teams. In the early 90s, Mothers must have simplified their production of Griffey Juniors in 3 Nolan Ryan sets, which were the 5,000 Ks, 7 no-hitters, and the 300 wins. From 1983 to 1998, Mother's Cookies released baseball cards both in their cookie packaging and a stadium giveaway. This was a distinctly West Coast release of a West Coast brand, which made cards from San Diego to Seattle and east as far as Houston and Minneapolis. The last baseball card set was in 1998, and apparently Mother's Cookies went out of business in 2008. The last Mother's Cookies sets were produced in 1998 after 117 sets and promos.
Well, kids, baseball season's here again. And with Post Cereal's baseball trading cards...
If you like baseball cards and collected them as a kid like me, then thanks for tuning into my video. If you'd like to see more history videos or have some memories about this iconic brand, leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. If you like history, then you should check out my other channels, Eric C. Production, where I'm bringing back memories from the good old days.
Bringing back memories from the good old days. That's super cool, man.